NIL Now with Lauren Sisler and Kevin Jones.
If you want to learn more about name, image, and likeness, you need to go to The Source. The NIL Now podcast from Headline Studio and Reddit highlights the biggest storylines with comments from key guests in the college and high school NIL space.
NIL is not a cherry on top. It needs to be thought about as a part of these young men and women's future to, further their careers. You should be able to leave college with something.
Subscribe to NIL Now on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Every year, thousands of human remains are found in the United States. And in one of every 4 instances, authorities can't identify the body. That's starting to change. I'm Dave Killen, co-host of The Unidentifieds, a new limited series podcast from the Oregonian and Oregon Live. We go deep into several cold cases and explain the science that's helping experts give these long-forgotten people their names back. Look for The Unidentifieds after you've finished listening to this podcast. Subscribe to The Unidentifieds on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Friday, or as yours truly likes to call it, Friday, from the Strictly Stripes podcast crew. We've had a lot of fun stuff going on in the offseason, if there really even is such a thing, because there's always something going on, so maybe there really never is an offseason. I guess at least until you get to the last few weeks before training camp, but we are in full action. But we're going to sort of take a step back and look at the Bengals offense and see where it stands in respect to the top offenses in the league, and we're going to have a very fan-friendly conversation that I think will excite folks, and that is who should be in the Ring of Honor this year. All of that coming up right here on the Strictly Stripes podcast. Welcome into another edition of the podcast. Muhammad Ahmad here with you alongside Mike Nizick and Andrew Gillis. Before we get started, we want to remind you guys to tell us why you're a Bengals fan. We've been getting quite a few amazing responses that I'm excited to share in the next couple days and weeks. And to let us know why you're a Bengals fan, go to cleveland.com/Bengals, or better yet, go to strictlystripes.com. Click on the link that says, "Why I'm a Bengals fan." Tell us your story. You click on it. There's a Google Doc that's a survey. You explain when you became a Bengals fan, why you're a fan, what the Bengals mean to you. And if your answer is one of the most authentic and coolest answers out there, we're not only going to share it on this podcast, we might actually have you tell the story, because we like to change things up a little bit around here. So go to strictlystripes.com and tell us your story. So I was looking at a list, guys, from Mike Martz, one-time Super Bowl head coach, took the Rams to the Super Bowl with the greatest show on turf, was an assistant under Dick Vermeil before that, was an offensive coordinator with a couple stints after that, including Mike's Chicago Bears, which is another conversation. But he released a list where he predicts his top 5 offenses for next season. He put the 49ers at number 1. He put the Chiefs at number 2, the Detroit Lions at number 3, the Philadelphia Eagles at number 4, and the Buffalo Bills at number 5. But not the Bengals. First of all, what do you think of Mike Martz's list? Before I even get to the Bengals side, does that list make sense when you look at it, or do you think there's a lot of holes or a lot of head scratchers in his list, whether it's the teams that are in it or the order, or however you look at it?
So just so I have this right, the list was in order: 49ers, Chiefs, Lions, Eagles, Bills.
Yes.
Yeah, the Lions on that list is pretty insane.
That's a head scratcher to me, honestly.
Yeah, I mean the 49ers on that list, if you want to argue that they're a quarterback away type of situation, if you want to say that if Trey Lance comes back, they can be really good, I'm okay with that. They've obviously got some pretty unique talent out there. Kansas City, no explanation needed. Philly,
of course,
same thing. Buffalo, same thing. Yeah, the Lions are the weird one. Yeah, it's a little perplexing, but this is the time of the year for that. You're going to see, it's going to be, you're going to see a lot of that. You're going to see a lot of stuff where some betting account or some football account will say something like, "Who's stopping this offense?" And it's just a list of the quarterbacks or whatever. So, I guess this is the time of the year for people to kind of make their opinions known, and some people have weird opinions.
Yep.
Well, it is the top 5 offenses from last year in terms of production. So, I mean, it's not exactly a creative list. I mean, Detroit was 4th with 380 yards per game. So, he just switched out the order. Kansas City was first last year with 413 yards per game. So, um, yeah, I mean, it wasn't, we just picked the 5 that were the top last year, essentially.
I mean, yeah, it's just I still feel weird about Detroit. Kansas City's a no-brainer. 49ers depends on what happens at quarterback. The Bills are a no-brainer. The Eagles are a no-brainer. I don't know if I would necessarily put the Chiefs at number 2. I think I'd put them at number 1, with respect to Bengals fans who will try to rip me a new one for saying that. I think the Chiefs should have been higher. To be honest, I'm not saying the Lions' offense will be bad. I mean, like Mike said, they were pretty efficient last year, especially given that they started 1-6, and they were basically 140 or one Seahawks loss away from making the playoffs. I mean, they're a good team, but I don't know how I feel about Jared Goff. I don't know. And I mean, they drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. We'll see what he's like. But you got to remember, they also traded away DeAndre Swift to the Eagles, which is why I think they also belong on that list, because he is good and he's going to help replace Miles Sanders. But to kind of cut to the chase here on the Bengals side, I mean, would you have swapped the Bengals for the Lions? Like, I don't know. Would you even put the Bengals in that top 5 ranking in general?
I mean, I would. I don't know if I would put the 49ers there either.
Yeah.
Their quarterback situation scares me. Purdy's I mean, who knows what his health is? I mean, Trey Lance has just like not played football in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
I mean, he barely played at North Dakota State. I remember he's been hurt in the NFL. He had the year off. It's been a real kind of roller coaster for his career. So, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't put the 49ers there. I think I would put, if I had to say, I'd probably put the Chargers up there, and then the Bengals. I'm pretty high on the Chargers. I've always kind of been. We're right around that time of the year. It's like, what day? We're recording this on what day? May 26th. So, I mean,
Friday.
This is kind of the time of the year where it's like, hey, wonder what the Chargers Super Bowl odds are. Wonder what their playoff odds are. And you start to look at that and you're like, hey, well, maybe. And you start to convince yourself of something. And then some star player gets a debilitating injury in training camp or in week 2. And then the Chargers go down. But now is the time of the year for the Chargers. So I'm throwing the Chargers in there with the Bengals.
Yeah, I don't know if I would. And because, I mean, if you're talking about just terms of who's going to be the top 5 in production, their run game scares me. I mean, they're not going to average 420 yards passing a game. So, you need to have sort of more of that balance to sort of crack that top 5. I mean, they were close. They averaged 360 yards last year, but, I would be hesitant to say, oh, they're, going to be in the top 5 just because, I don't know how, I mean, they averaged 95 yards rushing last year. Do they even get that? I'm just not sure.
I mean, yeah. By the way, Andrew, you mentioned the Super Bowl odds for the Chargers. I'd say, looking at the latest odds according to BetMGM, they have the 12th best odds to win the Super Bowl at plus 3,000 as of May 26th. The top 5 right now in order are the Chiefs, the Eagles, the Bills, the 49ers, and the Bengals. Which, I mean, that doesn't shock me. And then, of course, there's a bunch of other teams in between. The Lions are actually they're 3 spots ahead of the Chargers. They're the ninth best favorite team to win the Super Bowl. And don't get me wrong, I'm actually excited to watch the Lions next year. I think they will make the playoffs. I actually think they can win the NFC North because, I mean, the Packers are in a rebuild. The Bears are still, I mean, who knows, unless they shock everybody, they're in a rebuild with all those guys that they got this year, trading away the number 1 pick. And then I think the Vikings will still be legit. They won the division last year. They still have Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson. So it's going to really come down to those two. But again, like Mike was saying, oh, we don't know what's going to happen with the Bengals rushing offense. And at the same time, we don't know what Jahmyr Gibbs is going to look like. I think he'll be good, but we don't know for certain. And even then, let's say Jahmyr Gibbs actually lives up to the hype. Maybe he runs for 1,000 yards. He's like a Pro Bowler for all we know. The guy, I have high hopes on him, but I don't trust Jared Goff. He was not that good last year. Even when he got hot towards the end, and I don't think he's going to be much better. I mean, obviously they got Hendon Hooker, so we'll see what that project looks like. I don't know. I haven't really kept tabs on that, but I just don't think I would put the Lions in that list. I honestly, if I redid the list, I would do number 1, Kansas City. I would do number 2, Philadelphia. I would do number 3, Buffalo. I would do number 4, Cincinnati. And I would do number 5, San Francisco. I mean, like, what do you guys think of that list? Or better yet, how would you rearrange that list in your own way? I know, Andrew, you just said yours, but like, Mike, how would you rearrange it?
Yeah, I mean Kansas City first, probably Eagles second, Buffalo third. Pretty close to what they got. I don't know, maybe probably. I like the Chargers as well. I'm interested to see what step forwards Jacksonville takes. Miami might be there. That group of teams. I mean, the Bengals would certainly be that next tier, but I think the top 4 I think is pretty clear. It's just that, I think that number 5 spot's probably up for grabs.
Yeah. No, I think that makes sense. I will say this too. I mean, obviously, I think the biggest reason why people like Mike Martz and others are hesitant to put the Bengals in that top 5 is, I mean, simply put, I think it's just because of Joe Mixon and not knowing what's going to happen at running back next year behind him with either Chase Brown or Travion Williams. But do you think there's anything else that could be limiting the Bengals as a top 5 offense? Like, do you think it could be the fact that they don't have Hayden Hurst? There is uncertainty with Irv Smith. I mean, the offensive line, I think, is going to be better with Orlando Brown, but you still don't know how Jonah Williams looks at right tackle. Like, do you think those are legitimate things that might knock the Bengals out of being a top 5 offense in most people's minds?
No, I think, what could do it is the Lions are the team that everybody is really high on. Every year it kind of feels like there's a team that people just kind of latch onto and say, okay, this year's the year for this particular team. That feels like the Lions right now. So I don't know. I think that's just kind of one of those prisoner of the moment things where you look at the Lions and you say, wow, this team can be really good. And then, I mean, who knows? We'll see kind of what happens. If their receivers pan out and, they get decent offensive line play, they should be pretty good with the running backs that they brought in the offseason. Even with Jared Goff, who, again, had a really good year last year, but I'm not 100% sold on either. So yeah, I don't know. I just think I'm not sure how much, the tight end position is really going to hold the Bengals back, just because, like, if you're looking at it and you're trying to grade the AFC's offenses, like, how many people are sitting there going, yeah, they have Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and Joe Burrow, but man, they don't have Hayden Hurst anymore. And that's nothing against Hayden Hurst, who played, I thought, a pretty good role here in Cincinnati. It's just that a tight end is going to be the 4th option unless you're bringing in like a genuine stud at tight end. So yeah, I'm just not sure how much that really matters.
Yeah, I think there's skepticism, because I think you saw at times last year when they couldn't run the ball effectively, the offense stalled. They lost Samaje Perine. I think it's fair to wonder. I know they've sort of devalued the run game here and, focused on some of those shorter passes to sort of replicate it. But when you need short yardage, you need a couple yards in the red zone. I think it's tough sometimes that when you don't have an effective run game, and I think the Bengals are going to have to prove again that they can do that.
I agree with everything Mike is saying, but Andrew, there's a point I wanted to kind of nitpick where you said that, I don't think people are going to look at, they have Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and then look at the tight end option. Obviously, those guys will come first, but I don't think you can really overlook tight end, because part of why I think the Bills are on that list is, yes, you have Josh Allen, you have Stephon Diggs, their offensive line, they still have guys like Roger Saffold. I definitely get that, but I mean, Dawson Knox is a Pro Bowler, and he was one of their best receivers, and you just add Dalton Kincaid, who, I mean, I thought Michael Mayer was going to go before him, but clearly they thought he was the best tight end in the draft. I mean, I don't know. Don't you think that maybe tight end is actually part of why the Bills are a top 5 offense, because of Knox and because of Kincaid now?
Well, I mean, if you were to say in people's minds,
well, I guess in Mike Martz's mind, like looking at what he said, he actually said a big reason why, like I'm reading what he said. He said they drafted tight end Dalton Kincaid in the first round. Hopefully they will have more of a commitment to running the football instead of just a few plays here in a few plays there. But he mentioned him and he mentioned Dawson Knox. So, I mean, that, again, it's Mike Martz. He's one person, but maybe other people feel the same way. Like, is that enough of a differentiating factor to say, oh, the Bills have 2 great tight ends, the Bengals don't? Like, does that, you kind of agree with that?
No, I mean, well, first off, hilarious to say Mike Martz talking about running, or hear Mike Martz talking about
I
running
know.
football.
I know.
Considering
I know.
he's one of the better, offensive minds of the last, 20 years. No, you look at the receivers that Buffalo has, and like Stephon Diggs is obviously really good, but I'm taking Jamar Chase over Stephon Diggs. And then you got Gabe Davis and Dawson Knox, and even if you throw Dalton Kincaid into that mix, I'm still taking the Bengals over the Bills' skill positions. Like, T. Higgins is I think the gap is closer between he and Diggs than people think.
I agree.
And then I would take him over Gabe Davis without a second thought. Dawson Knox is obviously talented. I think he would be an improvement over what the Bengals have at tight end right now. But I don't know how much the needle's moving for me that you add another tight end to that offense. I'm just not sure that it should for other people either.
Yeah, no, I hear that. But at the same time, though, like, you do make a point there of, like, there's a narrow gap between Higgins and Diggs more than people realize. He put Chase over Diggs. And who knows, maybe Irv Smith, I'm not saying he'll be a Pro Bowler or an All-Pro. It'd be cool if he was, but maybe he surprises us and actually looks better than expectations say he's going to be. Those are arguments, I think, where you can't say, oh, if you're going to squeeze the Bengals in as a top 5 offense, you can at least put them at number 5 behind whatever order you have with the Chiefs, Eagles, 49ers, whatever you have at that top 4. I think the Bengals can sneak into that top 5. But when we come back, we're going to strictly focus in-house on the Bengals, but we're going to have, I guess you could say, a blast in the past. We're going to look through all 13 candidates for the Bengals Ring of Honor, and we're going to decide who we think should be the 2 nominees, or I should say finalists, for this year's Ring of Honor class when we return on the Strictly Stripes podcast. But I almost forgot. I want to remind you guys, we have a special conversation coming up with Bengals punter Brad Robbins, and I promise you, special teams guys are not as boring as you might think. Brad Robbins is an interesting guy, and we'll have that interesting conversation when we return on the Strictly Stripes podcast. All right, thanks for staying with us on the Strictly Stripes podcast. I'm joined by Bengals rookie punter Brad Robbins, who, hard to believe, you've already been here for 2 weeks now, Brad? How are you doing, my friend?
Yeah, 2 weeks. Man, it's flown by. No, I definitely feel really good, really excited. Just happy to be around, this culture. I was just talking to a couple of guys, who are next to me. And it's just like anytime I walk in the locker room, it's just so positive, just a good environment to be around, and really excited to compete and get after it.
You talk about the culture. Obviously people might say culture is cliche, but I think there's a unique culture that you can tie with this team. And so what have you seen from that? And why do you feel like you resonate with that culture so well?
Yeah, so I don't want to necessarily compare it to like Michigan and whatnot, but really I feel like one of the key things is developing your identity, not only as a player, but as a team. And what I've seen is just like, guys really welcoming you with open arms, especially like the young guys, the rookies, and just being able to have, like productive conversations and enjoying each other's company and really developing relationships with each other. That's something, I had breakfast with the quarterbacks this morning, right? And like that's not necessarily something that happens on every team, right? And guys aren't necessarily kind of into that relationship. Hey, what's going on? and to have those like kind of relationships, right? But I feel like that's an important thing, because if you don't know your teammates and you don't know who's, you don't know who your PP is on punt, or you don't know who's, playing on the opposite side of you as like another corner, right? Like, how can you trust that guy? So that's just my personal belief, and I feel like a lot of the guys really embody that and develop, personal relationships, and it's great.
You said you had breakfast this morning with the quarterbacks?
Yeah, we're just chatting it up about the Lakers, Nuggets, and all that kind of stuff, and golf and whatnot, and Batman, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't even matter. It doesn't have to be about football, right? So it's just about getting to know the guys and developing that personal relationship.
I mean, without giving away those private conversations, I mean, what is it like talking with Joe Burrow? People look at this guy from afar like he's this kind of larger-than-life figure, but here you are, like, eating breakfast with him, learning from him. Like, how do you kind of describe that experience, and why is it maybe different from what other teams have by chance? Like, just to the best of your knowledge, obviously.
Yeah, it's just really important to keep everything in perspective, Everybody, just as a guy, is always trying to do their best at their job, right? That's kind of where the microscope. We're under the microscope in that kind of capacity, right? But really just understanding that, everybody here is just a normal guy just trying to go about their business and do the best they can. And it's my belief that everybody's going to compete the best they can and try as hard as they can just to capitalize on this opportunity. It's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to be, a member of the NFL, right? So really just capitalizing and doing your best and working hard is all you can really ask for.
You talked about you didn't want to compare the culture too much to Michigan, but you have DJ here. You obviously have Dax here. I'm just curious, by the way, before I get to what I was going to ask, how close are you to DJ and Dax, like at Michigan and now? How close are you guys?
Yeah, we were close, especially, Dax left a little bit earlier, but me and DJ, he'll bring the GameCube during camp and stuff at the hotel we stay at Michigan. And, we play Super Mario Strikers together. It was me, Moody, DJ, and Mike Sanderstill. So we would always play 2-on-2 and definitely have that kind of relationship going forward and are able to talk to each other if we feel uncomfortable talking to other people, right? So we have that relationship already established.
And so to that point, you have the relationship established, and you guys played at Michigan together. Why is that so unique, being in Cincinnati together?
What do you mean by unique?
I guess to have that already and being in a place in Cincinnati that has the culture it has, why does that make it more special, I guess is the better way to ask it.
Okay. It just feels like kind of like a plug and play type deal. Rather than, I feel like at Michigan being there from 2017 to 2022, I had the opportunity to see a lot and be through a lot, right? Going through 2020 and the 2-4 season and then going to the top of being in the college football playoff and stuff, right? So I had the chance to really develop that culture with other teammates and stuff, right? So all the leaders of that team came together and kind of established our core values and what we wanted to believe in and what we wanted to chase, where it feels like at the program we're at now, we're not necessarily making as big of strides, but we're really looking to refine the smaller details, right? So, we're not going from, people listening. I have my hands really far apart, right? So, not going from here to here, but, having my hands a couple centimeters apart. We're going from here to here. So it's really just tightening down the details. And that's something I need to do. That's something everyone else needs to do, right? Just as far as doing your part and being able to compete at the highest level.
You're a very detail-oriented guy based on that description that you just gave with your hands. I mean, you're with a very detail-oriented guy like Darren Simmons.
Yep.
I saw him working with you on your place holding. I saw him giving you some pointers. What has it been like working with him, and why is he such a unique coach to work with?
Yeah, he definitely – I love the way he coaches. That's my favorite part of being here is and I pride myself on being coachable. I'm not somebody who's going to walk in here and know it all, right? So just kind of – it's a little bit like military. I like it. Once you get in here, you get to see all the stuff. It's like, hey, you didn't fold your socks the right way. Hey, you didn't put your shirt on the right way. You got to put it on this way type deal. So really just going back to the beginning and back to the basics. And that starts with, why do I do this game, or why do I play this game? I do it because I love it. It gives me a platform to help others and really be a part of something special, right? So that's my 3 core values starting. And then as far as technique goes, just breaking everything down back to the basics on how I started punting. Okay, looking at steps, here's what you're doing wrong, this is what you're doing good, let's work on what you're doing wrong. Holding, I like this, I like the way you're doing this, but this is what you need to work on, right? So chasing perfection is the name of the game, very much like, golfers. You're never going to be perfect, and there's always going to be some shots you wish you had back, but at the end of the day, as long as you work hard and work on that attention to detail and pride yourself on the little things, I feel like at the end of the day, you got to be happy with yourself.
My very last question to wrap up this really great conversation is, you mentioned you kind of want to just come in and sort of add those final details that you mentioned the Bengals, want to add, in terms of being the final touches for a Super Bowl championship team. How can Brad Robbins be the final touch to the Bengals Super Bowl aspirations?
Yeah, just looking Sorry, it's a little loud. Yeah, just looking, to what I can provide to this team, I feel like a level of consistency and dependability is something that's been kind of my calling card as a person, going since, I was U8 baseball, all that kind of stuff, right? It's been, okay, steady Eddie, this guy's consistent, I want to be the reason that, coaches and special teams coordinators and everybody can sleep at night. They don't have to worry about the punter position, right? So just, the opportunity to compete and be a part of this is such a blessing. And I feel like I can, I have an edge where I can provide that consistency and dependability.
That's rookie punter Brad Robbins. Love chatting with you. This was great. I'm sure people enjoyed listening to this. Appreciate your time, and hopefully we'll be hearing from you some more in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, likewise. Don't go away. We'll be right back on the Strictly Stripes podcast.
And thanks for staying with us on the Strictly Stripes podcast. Had a blast chatting with my man Brad Robbins in the Bengals locker room. I'm sure we'll be hearing from him a lot more because he is a very interesting guy who I look forward to chatting with in the future, and I'm sure you guys feel the same way. Before we get into our latest discussion on the Ring of Honor, we'll remind you guys to sign up for our Strictly Stripes newsletter. Go to cleveland.com/newsletters. It's free and in your inbox every morning. And make sure you sign up for our Cincinnati Football Insider subtext service if you want to get all the latest updates and news on the Bengals straight to your phone, where you can respond to us as well with your thoughts and opinions. Go to cleveland.com/Bengals and sign up. All you got to do is click on the blue banner at the top of the page when you go to the site, and it's a 2-week free trial to start, and it's $4.99 a month after that if you stick with it. And you can text stop at any time, although I don't think you will because a lot of people are joining us, and they're having fun with it, and we hope you do too. So this week, the Bengals released their finalists for the Ring of Honor. So obviously it's you could say the Bengals Hall of Fame, sort of speak. It's their version of it. Last year, they inducted the late Ken Riley. No, I'm sorry. No, not Ken Riley. He was inducted before that. He was inducted the year before in their inaugural class. Last year, they inducted Willie Anderson and Isaac Curtis. Willie Anderson, finalist for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, great offensive tackle. Isaac Curtis, one of the best receivers in team history. So real quick, I'm just going to go through the names on the list, 13 names who are finalists, and then I'm going to get your all's take on who you think out of that list should be your two finalists. You have Jim Breach, who was a kicker during that Super Bowl era in the 80s with Boomer Esiason. James Brooke, a running back who was part of those Bengals Super Bowl teams, at least the second one. Chris Collinsworth, a name who needs no further introduction. Corey Dillon, running back. Boomer Esiason, quarterback, who was also the team's last league MVP. Safety David Fulcher. Wide receiver Chad Ochocinco. I guess Chad Johnson technically. Nose tackle Tim Crumry. Dave Lapham, who was actually the team's current radio analyst and former offensive lineman. His fellow line mate, Max Montoya. Lemar Parrish, who was a cornerback and kick returner. Tight end Bob Trumpy. And linebacker Reggie Williams. I know that was a mouthful. That was a lot of names, and I think a lot of very well-deserving names on that list. But if you had to pick your two finalists from that top 13, who would it be and why?
If I had to go, if I had to kind of make that pick, I would take Chad Johnson first. I think when you kind of look at his production, he's the franchise's all-time leading receiver. In terms of yards, in terms of touchdowns, in terms of receptions, in terms of targets. He was obviously an outstanding player when he played. And, he kind of put, not to say he put Cincinnati on the map, but, when he was there, he was one of the most entertaining players in the league and, just kind of for his play style, but also his personality. So I think that he kind of, he just brought a lot of eyeballs to the team, and, he was one of the team's best players and one of the league's best receivers for a long time. So, yeah, I think I would go with Chad Johnson first. Second is harder. I lean Boomer Esiason. I think that when you kind of look at some of the numbers that he put up, he was in Cincinnati for 10 years. He was obviously very successful. You mentioned he won an MVP here. I think that that should carry some weight. So I would go Chad Johnson and Boomer as my two. I could also be convinced into Dave Lapham. Obviously the radio color commentator, just because obviously he had a pretty successful career. He was in Cincinnati for a while. I think he played like 140, 150 games or something like that. So, you're talking about a guy who was obviously here for the long term, played for a while, was in some historic games. And I don't think this can be kind of understated. He's a part of the team's radio broadcast now. So, I mean, you're talking about a guy who's just kind of been a Bengal for life. And I think that should matter as well. So I would say I would go with Boomer Esiason and Chad Johnson, but I could see a case for Dave Lapham as well.
Well, since it's up to the fans, I said on our subtext that I think the four most likely are those three plus Chris Collinsworth, because those are the most visible Bengals currently on the football landscape. Chad Johnson's a regular at home games. Boomer Esiason has his own radio shows on CBS as well. Chris Collinsworth obviously is one of the top analysts in the league and has the high profile Sunday night slot. So I mean, if you're gonna pick four that are going to be front runners, I would think it's those guys. I would go with the Esiason. That Super Bowl appearance and MVP season was, I think the best individual achievement on the list. And then Chad Johnson as well, just because of his overall production.
Man, those are all good options. I mean, like Mike said, the names you mentioned are the most visible, so naturally they're going to get the most attention. And that's not taking away from the other guys. Tim Crumry is one of the best nose tackles in team history. Max Montoya, probably the best offensive lineman in team history, not named Willie Anderson or Anthony Munoz. And he was an interior guy, so you could actually say he was like the best interior lineman in team history, because obviously Anderson and Munoz played outside. I don't know. I just think for just what we know and just for the sake of who's got the most spotlight, I think I would personally go with Boomer and Chris. I mean, because I think you look at it as, that was a duo. That was an iconic duo that Bengals fans remember for the better back half of the 80s. It was a duo that, went to the Super Bowl. And obviously, that wasn't his main target. Eddie Brown was his main target. That year they went to the Super Bowl and played the 49ers. But Chris Collinsworth was one of the few players who played in both of the Bengals Super Bowls in the 1980s. So he played with Dave Lapham in that first Super Bowl. And obviously he played with Boomer in the second one. And I think just naturally, I'm not saying his post-football career is better than his actual football career, but he became well more known after he became an analyst. So he's definitely done very well for himself. And I think you can't overlook that as well. And then, like I said, Boomer Esiason, I think, is the best franchise quarterback the Bengals have had, not named Joe Burrow. No offense to Andy Dalton or Carson Palmer. They have their own place in team history. But like Mike said, that MVP season he had, it was the most recent one that any Bengal has had. And I think only Joe Burrow has come close to winning an MVP, in that span since Esiason retired. So, yeah, I think I'm just going to have to give the nod to Boomer, and I'm going to have to give it to Chris Collinsworth. I will say, though, I think you have to give an honorable mention to Montoya and Crumry. I think in the future, assuming that, Johnson or Esiason or Collinsworth, those names Mike mentioned, if they get in, I think you have to start looking at Montoya and Crumry. Crumry, I think, is top 5 in a lot of stats among Bengals defensive tackles in team history as far as sacks, tackles, specifically by a D tackle. I know Geno Atkins pretty much surpassed all or most of his records. So who knows? In a couple of years, Geno Atkins will be on that list since he's retired. Although it feels like yesterday I watched them play. Do you guys give an honorable mention to anybody else we didn't mention off that list?
Those were the guys that I thought.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
Jim Breach is actually an interesting one. Maybe I'm over exaggerating this, but I think he's actually pretty slept on. He's very well known in Cincinnati to the best of my knowledge. I think at the time and even now he's still a fan favorite because this is a fan season ticket holder type vote. So I could see him getting some consideration.
Yeah, I could kind of also, if you just kind of, if you look at the stats, I also think Corey Dillon's up there as well. He made a couple Pro Bowls in Cincinnati. I know he didn't, he left and immediately won a Super Bowl, but, he's the franchise's all-time leading rusher. He rushed for 1,000 yards, almost every season he's been here, or he was here. I think it was all but 2, if memory serves. I was actually just looking at that the other day for something else. But Corey, I think I would give kind of an honorable mention or a tip of the cap to him for that.
Yeah. That's a good one too, and it just sucks for him because like he played so well, but the Bengals were just so god awful while he was there. I mean, because he was with that 2-14 team, that is what allowed them to get Carson Palmer. He even voiced his frustrations at time, and he even said in his own words, literally word for word, "We will never win with the Brown family in Cincinnati." So he was vocal. He didn't hide his feelings, and obviously he was traded before he won a Super Bowl. So um, maybe didn't have the best of terms in Cincinnati, although he had a great career. But I'm sure the fans will definitely honor that. Yeah, I don't know. David Fulcher is another sneaky one, but I think Fulcher kind of ranks in that bottom tier, not because of him, but this is just a very talented list, man. There were some good players. They were all some good players back in the day. I think you could even say Reggie Williams was one of the best linebackers in team history, but he was never really made any accolades beyond like his stats. Wasn't like a all Pro Bowl guy, so sucks for him. But hey, I mean, they'll all get their chance. That's why they're on the list. Stay with us. We are going to. Oh, actually, wait. I wanted to ask you guys this. Because speaking of Memorial Day, I was about to say we will not have a podcast on Memorial Day because we're going to be busy enjoying ourselves, just like everyone else. Which is why I wanted to ask you guys: do you have like any? I mean, this might sound funny, but like, do you have any Memorial Day traditions? Do you do anything on Memorial Day, or is it just sit at home, grill, do whatever? Like, what do you guys do? Anything? Just nothing? Nothing is something. Sit at home and relax. Can't beat that.
Well, it just kind of depends. I grew up, obviously, I think I've mentioned this before. I grew up in Northern Virginia, right outside DC. So I've been to, there's a parade in DC. I've been to the parade in DC a couple of times. So that was cool. This year I'm, just kind of taking it easy. I'm going to a NASCAR race in Charlotte, praying the weather holds out. I just enjoy the day typically. You just get to a point where it's like, it's too hot outside to do anything besides just, drink beer and grill food. So, I'm enjoying the time away is going to be nice.
Yeah, we're not in elementary school. Like life goes on. I mean, my wife works. I mean, it's not like you get, what are you going to do?
Yeah, I don't really have any traditions. I keep it simple. I enjoy myself. If there's a baseball game on TV, I'll watch it. Probably not the Reds because of how god awful they are. But yeah, I like to grill anyway, so it just gives me an excuse to grill. But I wanted to ask you, Andrew, you said you're from Northern Virginia. What city in Northern Virginia did you live in? Did you grow up in?
Sterling. It's in Loudoun County.
How far is that from Arlington?
Like 30 minutes. Fairly close. I commuted there for a little bit back living there, so it's not bad.
Okay, I was gonna say, speaking of Memorial Day, have you been to Arlington National Cemetery?
I actually never have. Funny enough, I lived there for pretty much my whole life, and I never was there. I've never been there. I've never been to. I've never been to like the grave sites. I've never done that. I think one year my mom did something where it was like you go lay Christmas wreaths on tombstones. But yeah, I never went. I went to the tomb. I'm trying to think. I don't know if the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is. I think that's in Arlington National Cemetery. So I guess
I think it is. I think it is.
Yeah, I think I went there actually on a Memorial Day. I went to the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, so I did that. I've never been to like all the grave sites and everything like that. But so yeah, I guess I have been.
I heard it's actually it's a very interesting place to visit. I've never been to the DC area, but if I ever go, I definitely want to check it out. Because I know another interesting spot there is the Eternal Flame, where President John F. Kennedy is buried with his family and relatives. So that's kind of interesting. I just want to see that because I mean, basically the flame, I don't think, with like one exception, I don't think it's ever gone out since he was buried over almost 60. It'll be 60 years since he was assassinated. So that is pretty crazy. But yeah, no, I was just curious because you said Northern Virginia, and I thought of Memorial Day, and I put the two together. But that's kind of cool. But stay with us. We're gonna enjoy Memorial Day, celebrate those who served, and we will get back with you all on Tuesday with another line of great discussions involving the Bengals. But once again, for myself, Andrew, and Mike, I'm Muhammad Aman.